this is Betty Bluebell. She's a 1929 Chevy International truck. Over there on the bench is my dad, and in about 1987 he bought Betty. She wasn't named Betty at that time, but he bought this beautiful little truck and he actually drove it at that time, and then it didn't seem to want to run anymore, so he completely dismantled it, hoping to restore it. Turns out there was a fuel valve shut off, and somehow that got missed. So anyway, she got completely dismantled. Then a whole bunch of life happened that meant that she just sat there for many, many years in his barn, completely dismantled. So about 10 years ago, I said, hey, let's dig Betty out and start restoring her. And as he was starting to dig the pieces out, a friend stopped over and said, you will never finish that truck. Sell it to me. So Dad sold it to Jim. And I was a little upset, but anyway, Jim did some amazing things. He did a lot of work restoring her, and then he got tired of working on her, so I bought her from Jim, partially restored. And one of the things Jim had done was paint her burgundy. Straight from the factory, they all came in this Bluebell blue, it was called. And I kind of wanted to have her restored to the original color. So it took me a little while to decide to start working on her, because it was a big job to completely dismantle her again, but that's what we did. Completely dismantled, repainted it, put her back together. And so today, with the help of my dad and my nephew and my husband, we're going to try to get Betty running. So I'm going to try and film some things as we go along, show what we have to do to get her back together, because right now she's kind of an empty truck. She has her engine and transmission and all the parts are there, windows are in, upholstery's on the seats, like all that stuff's done. No fluids in her yet, no battery. So we're gonna show you the process to get this old truck running. Come on the journey. All right, so in order to get the battery in, we have to lift the floor out. So, not sure this was the original floor, but
well, you take it out your
it's
side.
The floor.
Safer.
So can you see where the battery goes?
And so here comes Joan with the battery, and this is startup day, first time since the major rebuild. We had the cab off the chassis, we had the fenders off, we had everything except the engine pulled out. The long one is your ground, so that should be good.
All right.
If you tighten it up and something goes wrong and you got to get a wrench and start trying to loosen it off,
Okay, so we'll leave it just like that for now. So checking the battery to make sure it's hooked up correctly. There, it's going to the negative. We know that it's hooked up the right way. So we're ready to rock and roll. All right, we're gonna check to make sure we have some sparky spark going on here. So you've got, what have you got going on?
Well, just clip that on something that should be a ground. The test light goes on there. Sloan, will you go in and turn the ignition switch on? Interesting. I don't see a little green light. There's the points open. There.
So we're checking to see if there's
So
sparky spark.
we have power to the we have power to the points.
Okay.
The light wasn't on because the points were closed, which is in effect a ground, so there was no power left over for the light. I rolled the engine a little bit, now the points are open and I'm reading 6 volts, or reading voltage. This is just an indicator light. Well, this is the very first year for a Chevrolet 6-cylinder engine. I'm not sure the horsepower, but something in the 45 to 50 horsepower range probably. The valve cover is not authentic. That's actually a 1930 valve cover. The difference being those little tiny louvers on top. The first year they didn't have any vents, and what they discovered was they were getting a lot of condensation and sludge buildup because the fumes couldn't go anywhere and they would condense on the cool metal surface and cause a lot of actually water dripping down inside the engine. So in almost every case they got replaced with a later valve cover. Saved a lot of engine trouble. So that's the only non-authentic part. Otherwise everything is the way Chevrolet made it in 1929. Let's go around the other side.
All right, so this is the other side of the engine. What's going on here that's special and new for 1929s?
Well, again, the first year for this engine and the updraft carburetor. Rather not a real great carburetor. They didn't, I think they only used it 2 years. It has what they call a floating venturi. Little floats up and down according to the airflow. This external pump is the accelerator pump, which in the next evolution that was built right in. That's kind of an add-on. Maybe they didn't realize they needed it until after they produced the vehicle, I don't know. And here's the dipstick. That's where we check the oil. And
we do have oil in it.
It has
Good
oil,
for us.
nice and clean.
Ah.
Whoops, and there is some antifreeze in it. That's interesting. Okay, the hose feels like it's empty, but
Yeah. All right, well, we'll top it off.
maybe we'll find out that it's not down all that far. Yeah.
Looks like we're putting blood into Betty.
Okay, it wasn't down all that much. It's red and green mixed together.
Cool. So we'll have brown antifreeze then. Okay, so we're gonna put fuel in Betty now, and I'm not a smoker, so I haven't lit my cigarette yet. But the first thing we do is we pull out the passenger seat, and there's the gas tank. So you're sitting on top of the fuel tank to drive this thing. That's not terrifying. All right, and it's completely empty right now, and we're gonna pour some fuel in.
And as a note, this is the first year for the 6-cylinder Chevy, but it's also the first year for a Model A Ford. In the Chevrolet, you sat on top of the fuel tank. In a Model A Ford, it was behind the speedometer, basically the cowl, so you sat with the gas tank on top of your legs. Neither one of them would probably meet safety standards today.
Probably not. We don't have the floor panel on, just in case something goes sideways, we can pull the battery power apart quickly. But we're gonna see if we can fill up the sediment bowl and see if we can get this thing running. This is the starter? Really?
That's it.
That sounds like the starter. We're gonna crank it over now, but notice that the key is not turned on, so we're not gonna get ignition, but we are gonna get kind of the fuel moving.
Stop. Did the valve get turned on the bottom of the gas tank?
Okay, so remember the fuel wouldn't work when Grandpa tried to do this back in 1987? There's a fuel shut-off. We are now turning the fuel shut-off on.
The sediment bowl, pre-primed. This engine has a screen, so the fuel coming in, any dirt should land on top of that screen, which is the preliminary filter. Probably, well, between the sediment bowl and that screen, I think that's all you get for a fuel filter. Whoop. Awkward thing to get at. I think that looks right.
Because he wants to be able to pull the battery cable. Fuel's coming into the sediment bowl now.
Hopefully that's not just a sign that it's leaking air out and fuel's going to follow it. All right, now we obviously have a leaky sediment bowl because now we have gasoline running out. Or it should be running out.
So our gasket wasn't good, so we're making a new gasket right now for the sediment bowl. That's your homemade attempt at a gasket.
Gasket for the sediment bowl.
And that's more traditional gasket material than what was actually in it, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
They typically, in the old days, were made out of cork.
Key on. Here we go. Oh, almost. We're getting closer.
Just loosened off the metering jet because it was screwed in tight, so we couldn't get any gasoline. This little screw.
This one has an S on it. Is that, I mean, there's our key to turn it on.
Actually, yeah, one of these is, okay, this one's the choke.
Okay.
And this is the spark advance. So to start, you're supposed to pull that out, and after it starts, you're supposed to push it in. And the same, this you pull it out.
So is that something I should be doing then? Maybe we'd have more success with starting it?
It's trying to start, it's just not getting its gas. So
Oh, okay.
it's not 100% critical, but typically if it's set up right, yeah, you should pull that out and start the engine and push it back in. It just retards the spark for starting so it doesn't kick back on the starter.
Key on.
Bring anything up.
That's for the spark advance, and that's the choke, and that's the throttle, and here's the starter down here.
So this is the first test drive. We just got it running. And Joan is going to go for the first cruise. Sounds great.
God, that sounds awful! Uh-oh. You know what I just thought of? What? So we got some air in the tires now, and we've got the floor in. So Sloan and I are gonna try and have another little drive in it. Let's see what happens. What do you think of this? Fun driving around?
Oh yeah.
This is 2023, and this truck was built in 1929. It's almost 100 years old. This is the first time it's been running in about